Hi everyone, I decided to put a video together about Justin Trudeau and how this all ties into the role that he's playing in what's happening on the world stage right now. And I just finished watching a video of peaceful protesters getting trampled by horses in our capital in Canada. And I understand that it's all part of the awakening process because it's going to trigger, more countries to stand up and fight for their freedoms. And I understand that role. And I'm going to try to explain this role and how it's all being played out through his whole life. Okay, so there's ties to Nixon, there's ties to obviously Castro and his father. There's also ties to his deceased brother. And the whole storyline of him, it seems like he is the Lion King. Now, I've done videos on the Lion King falling before, and I assumed it was Trump. But with the new revelations I've gotten from just like doing the research on Trudeau, I think he is the Lion King that is going to fall. Okay, so how that fall happens, is I don't know, but it's just that he seems to be have been portrayed to play this role, and I'm going to explain that to you guys. It also ties into Snoopy cartoon and some decodes for the Super Bowl I'm going to go over too as well. So I hope you enjoy it. It's been a crazy week up here in Canada and watching all this, and I'm proud of my fellow Canadians that are standing for peace and freedom. And it's just really fascinating to watch it all unfold. Justin was born on Christmas Day in 1971, and his younger brother was also born on Christmas Day 2 years later. Now, he had the moon in Pisces with Chiron and Mars. I don't know his exact time of birth, so all I can say is that Pisces in general rules the 12th house. It's this spiritual constellation. And with Chiron there, the wound that we take on would represent a wound feeling like the universe is out to get you. It's kind of feeling like, yeah, that you're being taking on a spiritual wound. So even though I don't know what house this is happening in, I do know what Pisces represents, and I do know what the Chiron wound represents. So that really is his role. And Chiron is currently back in Pisces, and it's in conjunction with the Sun and Mercury, which is the mind. And this is all happening on April 4th. So this is like number 44, which in Gematria represents death. Now, somebody noticed in my last video, the little preview I did for the Super Bowl, the car that Mary J. Blige was driving was a Bugatti Chiron. Venus and Chiron represent an interesting notion that being on Valentine's Day represents healing and recognizing the importance of loving oneself. Here are the 5 Titans representing the 5 planets. They have 50 Cent hanging upside down in this cubicle, which he would represent the Hangman card, which is not the good path, even though they're using the Rubetto colors of the red and white. Rubetto is the final stage of a soul's alchemy. And Mary died, basically, or collapsed on the stage, and she went into the pentagon position of the Da Vinci Man, which is really, her 5-pointed star of Venus, which she represented was Venus, but it's showing that Venus is in death, right? So she's collapsed. So the mutable cross, which is the AI, I believe, path, which is ruled by Jupiter in Sagittarius, Jupiter in Pisces, and then Mercury in Gemini and Mercury in Virgo. There is no Venus on the mutable cross, and there is no Mars, and there is no Saturn. Okay, so those are all representing ascension. Saturn holds your keys, which is in Capricorn. He holds the key. In Aquarius, he's the age of Aquarius, which is freedom. Venus is Libra, balance, justice, or the Taurus, it's the silver gate. It represents the eye of God, or your all-seeing eye, because it rules the second house, which is your Taurus. Lateral ventricles is your horns in your head, which is where your third eye is. So Venus is kaput in this Super Bowl. So I believe this whole Super Bowl is representing the mutable cross, which is the AI path. I said in the preview on my last video that he represented Mercury, which is the mutable cross, and he has the five-pointed star in a trinity form on him. All the dancers around him are really kind of robotic. They look like they're kind of like walking zombies. They also make a six-pointed star, which is not really the good star. This is bringing you to the AI, and the whole floor of the whole Super Bowl with their dance was really a circuit board. You can see it there. They had Eve After Dark on one of their signs. Basically, the whole set looked like FEMA containers to me. One of the commercials had Arnold Schwarzenegger in as Zeus, and Hera, which is Juno. That's his wife. They also showed Neptune, which is really your dream state, also Christ consciousness. Another commercial, they were kind of in a duality, gambling, and this gambling chip was shoes, which is your souls, and they were golden. Next, they brought a vacuum cleaner, an automatic vacuum cleaner, and the cat's on it. So the cat represents the year that we're in. We're in the year of the tiger. So anything cat is representing this year. And the whole vacuum thing ties into the Antilla constellation that's above the ship in the sky, and it's a vacuum. Okay, so I really believe that's the bad path. It's like being sucked into a wormhole, right? So it's really not the good path. Another commercial with Irish Spring. It was kind of funny at first. This guy, he's going into paradise, and then they don't like you if you smell bad, and they show the white rabbit, which is the bad path, and they cleanse him. And it's just funny. It's just funny how it's all, the symbolism is in every friggin' thing these days. Now, of course, the Bengal Tigers lost 20-23. I knew the Rams were going to win. Actually, I knew it before they even picked the teams. Like, I asked my mate a few months back, I said, who's the 6 teams? And he told me all of them. I said, oh, the Rams are going to win, because I know that's the Lamb of God. It's your crown. And this is where we're getting to right now. You have to wear your crown. I really like how they use the guy's name Joe, number 9, and then Donald, number 99. So 9 represents ascension, and they're using Donald and Joe, right? So they're creating the duality between the two parties in the United States. The water tiger is essentially a humanistic time, in other words, favorable in realizing dreams and making important decisions, but which will require a lot of courage. Not only that, but he invited people to take advantage of his arrival to reinvent themselves in various aspects, encourage ourselves to create parallel universes that transcend us, look for similar communities, return to nature, learn permaculture, and develop a lot of labor therapy. So it's all going back to Earth and, creating a new Earth. So this is a really important year. And the courage it takes to stand and hold the line when police with batons and horses are there ready to trample you, and you're just trying to stand there in a peaceful way. This takes a lot of courage. It was really, amazing to watch today, and I do think it's going to awaken the world. The fact that Trudeau allowed these horses to trample, citizens of Canada. Leo is considered, I guess, in Chinese mythology to represent the tiger as well. So it represents the sun, right? And Leo, it's the king, it's the royalty, it's regal. It's your honor, it's your pride. Now, the tiger also appears in the Dan Gung myth about the founding of Korea's first kingdom. In the story, Hyungnung, the son of the heavenly king Hwanin, I'm saying all these wrong, I'm sure, down came to earth to live amongst people. On his journey, he met a tiger and a bear that wanted to become humans. The 2 animals were given the task of waiting inside of a cave for 100 days, surviving only on mugwort and garlic. Ultimately, the bear was able to stand the test of patience and was turned into a human woman that Wang Gung would marry. The pair had a child named Dan Gun, who would then go on to establish the first kingdom of Korea. In the end, the tiger was left to roam Korea and ended up in more folk tales than the bear too. So the story of the tiger and the bear is about an animal wanting to become a human. It wants transformation. So there's a transformation happening. So I do think this Year of the Tiger has to do with transforming our reality in some way. Trudeau had two brothers. The one on the left is Michael, and he's the one that passed away. Alexandra Trudeau, the younger one of the two Christmas babies of Pierre Trudeau and Margaret Trudeau, exactly 2 years younger than Justin. The family was attending a 1973 Christmas midnight mass at Mount Carmel Roman Catholic Church when Margaret Trudeau went into labor and was rushed to the Ottawa hospital. His mother struggled with severe postpartum depression after his birth and was later diagnosed with bipolar disorder. He was given the nickname Sasha. So then Margaret Trudeau said, Justin, 6, is the prince, a very good little boy. Sasha, born Christmas Day 1973, is a bit of a revolutionary, very determined and strong-willed. And Michael is a happy, well-adjusted child who combined the best traits of both brothers. And he's the one that passed away. So he's the middle brother. So the Trudeaus had a surprise wedding that wasn't planned for the media. So Trudeau was 30 years older than Margaret Trudeau, Sinclair at the time. And he was a swinger. He was like a party guy. He'd never been married at 53, and I guess it didn't look good for him politically. So eventually he ended up divorcing her and having an affair with Margaret Kidder, who was Lois Lane in Superman. He also had a child, Sarah, with Deborah Ryland Coyne. So what's interesting is I remember, because my parents were really intrigued with the Trudeaus at the time, and my dad was kind of disgusted with Margaret Trudeau because she was a real swinger. She used to like party a lot, and she had affairs with lots of different men, and it was well known, I guess, in the media. And she was doing this when she was married to Trudeau. So he met her when she was like 18. And this is them dancing together on Halloween in 1969. Now, this article is saying that they were in the Caribbean in the spring of 1971. This is when they got married. And in fact, they adored Castro. In fact, the Trudeaus were swingers. This is what you need to know. So Margaret Trudeau, Pierre Trudeau, and Fidel Castro were all notoriously sexually promiscuous. Margaret Trudeau was the partner who unquestionably had sex with men while married to Pierre. Nobody knows if Pierre objected. They met when he was 48 and she was 18. They got married when he was 53 and she was 23. Their marriage surprised Canada because Pierre had been a lifelong playboy with no wife or children. He would be turning 60 when she was barely out of her 20s. So she publicly states today she suffered from bipolar disorder and self-control issues. She smuggled drugs in the Prime Minister's official government luggage. She sneaked away from official functions to get high. She partied scandalously clad at Studio 54. She became embroiled in a scandal for having sex with Ted Kennedy. According to Keith Richards of the Rolling Stones, Pierre broke up with her while she was having an affair with Ronnie Wood. So there you go. It was pretty crazy times back in the 70s. But the question is, is Justin's father, Castro or Trudeau? He looks identical to Castro, right? And literally, they both loved Castro. Trudeau went to Cuba, and he was known for saying, "Long live Castro." So, you can see him here with the babies, and there's Trudeau with Castro, and then when Castro came to Pierre Trudeau's funeral, here he is with Justin, and they're looking pretty intense and emotional together. Now, when Castro died, people were like kind of shocked with what Justin said. His statement was met with puzzlement and derision by Americans, including United States Senator Marco Rubio of Florida, who is a Cuban of Cuban descent. Is this a real statement or a parody? Because if this is a real statement from the PM of Canada, it is shameful and embarrassing. The statement spawned the Twitter hashtag Trudeau eulogies, which quickly began trending as people emulated Mr. Trudeau's upbeat tone and lack of criticism, while controversially Darth Vader achieved great heights in space construction and played a formative role in his son's life, tweeted Jason Macios, riffing on the Star Wars movie villain. With deep sadness, we appreciation, we honor Saron, who sought to create a more unified world, which is the evil eye, right? So Canada, long one on Cuba's closest Western allies, hosted secret talks between Cuba and U.S. Brokered by the Vatican that led to resumptions of diplomatic ties between the two foes last year. So the Vatican's involved as well between Cuba and Canada. So yeah, not good. So here's the eulogy. The Prime Minister Justin Trudeau today issued the following statement on the death of former Cuba President Fidel Castro. It is with deep sorrow that I learned today of the death of Cuba's longest-serving president. Fidel Castro was larger-than-life leader who served his people for almost half a century, a legendary revolutionary and orator. Mr. Castro made significant improvements to the education and health care of his island nation. While a controversial figure, both Mr. Castro's supporters and detractors recognize his tremendous dedication and love for the Cuban people, who had a deep and lasting affection for El Comandante. I know my father was very proud to call him a friend, and I had the opportunity to meet Fidel when my father passed away. It was also a great honor to meet his three sons and his brother, President Raul Castro, during my recent visit to Cuba. So, Justin went down to Cuba. On behalf of all Canadians, Sophie and I offer our deepest condolence to the family, friends, and many, many supporters of Mr. Castro. We join the people of Cuba today in mourning the loss of this remarkable leader. Now, this remarkable leader, as he puts it, has put tons of people to death. So it's really bizarro, and I guess it's just because his parents had such, a close relationship with him that he felt this way. So anyhow, it's quite embarrassing for Canada in a way. It's like, oh my God, this is like total Marxism. It's not good. So world leaders were kind of in shock. So Mr. Trudeau's comments on Castro were markedly more positive than most Western leaders, who either condemn the revolutionary leader's human rights record or tiptoed around the subject. Instead, Mr. Trudeau warmly recalled his late father's friendship with Castro and his own meeting with Castro's three sons and brother. So yeah, so people don't have the same views as Justin Trudeau. Justin likes acting. He was an actor. He also was a school teacher. And he likes to dress up, blackface, Superman, he just has all these different costumes. Right now, he's representing the one on the far right, which is looking like Hitler. Michael Trudeau was killed in an avalanche accident when he was in BC. And This is Margaret Trudeau with Justin talking about avalanche victims, and this is Justin showing a photo shoot when he's trying to, I guess, raise money for avalanche victims. His body was never found, so they ended up raising money to rebuild the cabin that he stayed in the night before his death. It replaced the one Michael slept in the night before the avalanche swept him on Kokanee Lake 5 years ago. His spirit was at home here, and I could rightly entrust him to these mountains, Michael's brother Sasha told supporters after trekking through Kokanee Glacier National Park to the chalet with his mother, Margaret. So over the past 2 years, the family, along with friends from West Kootenay Parks, raised over $974,000 to build the cabin. So Michael's name is the 11th of the 13 names on the sign that hangs on the wall inside the cabin. Now, what's interesting is that this happened. He died on November 13th. So they've put, you see how there's they've used the numbers there. It's been very healing, this whole process, Margaret says. This is the grave, and it's wonderful to be able to visit it. So, yeah. So the fact that he died November 13th, which ends up coming to 33, is interesting. This is the rebuilt cabin that was nearly $1 million put into it. And I couldn't find any old pictures of it. So it's pretty beautiful. So he was born on October 2nd, 1975, and November 13th, 1998, he died. So he was 23 at the time, and here's a picture of him with Justin. This cartoonist got a big of a backlash when he did an avalanche cartoon about Trudeau's election. So Michael died when he was 23, and Justin, when he was 23, he got this tattoo, which was just a world on his left arm. And when he turned 40, he had this raven built around the world. So he's got this raven on him. And when he got his COVID vaccine, they poked the needle right into the world part of his tattoo, which, it just creeps me right out. There's lots of pictures of him boxing. But this tattoo is a Haida tattoo. The Haida community was very upset that he got this tattoo without their permission. It says here that the Davison painting Trudeau used in his tattoo was the raven bringing the light to the world. And at first they were excited because they had also given, I think, generously to his father, and they created a name for him when he went to visit their island, which is just in north of Vancouver, like up the coast, the Charlotte Islands. So they gave him a name that translates to "his voice is good as God," and that was for his father, Pierre Trudeau. We were all so excited before Justin became Prime Minister. We had high hopes of a better relationship with government, he says. That's starting to sour. I am certainly disappointed. And that was because of the whole pipeline thing that happened in BC. The Native people were not happy with Justin. And not to mention his failed attempt with the Reconciliation Committee for the 5,000 missing Native women. And then the fact that they still don't have clean running water. He's pretty much thrown them under the truck, like the truckers. This is what he said a year ago about the truckers. While many of us are working from home, there are others who aren't able to do that, like the truck drivers, who are working day and night to make sure our shelves are stocked. So when you can, please thank a trucker for everything they're doing and help them however you can. Yeah, he knows the role he's playing, right? Honestly, I'm going to explain how I know this. It has to do with Nixon. Now, here's the story of the raven. So at the beginning of time, the world was consumed by darkness, and the raven had existed since the beginning of time and was growing tired of living in the dark. And after some period of time, the raven came across an old man who lived with his one and only daughter. The old man had a little box that contained all the light of the universe, and the raven decided to steal it from the man and his daughter. Once the daughter went to the river to gather water, the raven transformed himself into a fir needle and floated into the daughter's basket. She drank the water, needle included, and the raven found himself in the stomach of the daughter. He then changed into a human fetus and was eventually born as the grandson of the old man. The raven convinced the old man to allow him to hold the box of light, and when the old man was handing it over, the raven transformed to his original form and stole the ball of light in the box. He escaped the house of the old man and gave the ball of light to the universe. Then closing, he says, I've always thought the raven as an animal of darkness, but in this case, the raven is a source of light. Now, this is what I do believe. I do believe Justin Trudeau is representing the darkness that needs to happen to bring the light. Okay, because we have to create the light. Nobody else is going to create it for us. There has to be tons of darkness, and then we stand up to create the light. And it's just always about, standing for justice, right? It's the justice card. You have to stand for justice. And it's about healing all the ancestral lines that have suffered from colonialism and how they were not allowed to live in harmony with nature. And this pain that's happened on this planet has to be healed to go into the Aquarius age. It has to. And so it's the native people of these communities that, and just the salt of the earth type of people, the manual laborers that are more connected to earth, that have to do the standing up. So I found this Haida sculpture of the raven, and look, it's on top of people that are squished in a shell of a turtle, it looks like. So it's like they're being suppressed, right? So that's Justin Trudeau's role. There's other mythology with the ravens. So King Arthur's squires are attacking Owen's ravens. When Owen asks that this be stopped, Arthur only responds, your move. It's like a chessboard. So finally, Owen orders his ravens to attack Arthur's servants. Then Arthur asks him to call them off, and Arthur's servants, when Arthur asks him to call them off, Owen says, your move, Lord. Eventually, Arthur crushes the chess pieces into dust, and the two declare peace between their forces. And remember the Titan Super Bowl performers preview was to do with the chessboard. Ravens figure heavily in Celtic mythology and legend. They are linked to darkness and death, especially the death of warriors in battle. Celtic war goddess often took them the form of a raven in the dream of Roadheadway. Now, I've mentioned before that the Game of Thrones is all tied into this script that we're in. And of course, Jon Snow, the King of the North, has a raven on him, right? And eventually he's not really the king. He never becomes the king, right? He ends up going back behind the ice wall. And so, yeah, so he's not the king, and the king, falls in a way because it represents death, right? The raven as well. It's the bringer of light, but it's also death. So it's the duality. Underwater archaeologists from the University of Victoria are seeking to confirm the stone structure discovered in 2014 on the seabed of Hecate Strait. So Hecate is August 13th, and this is all tied into the Washington triangle that aligns to the sky on August 13th. Okay, that's the Hecate, that's her day, August 13th. Okay, she's the keeper of the keys as well. So, and I think ravens do go with her as well. So the Hecate Strait may date back to 13,700 or more years ago and be the earliest known sign of human habitation in Canada. Coastal sites of this area are now deep underwater. So yeah, it's a very rich historical area. Now these Queen Charlotte Islands, that's what they're named after. They have the same climate as Scotland, so it's lots of moss and floral. Now there's a bit of controversy about Charlotte. Queen Charlotte, she had, I think, oh my God, 13 children, or 15, and 13 of them lived. But the thing was, there's history of her looking a little bit like African ancestry. So there's like this bit of scandal with it. And it was brought up again when Meghan Markle married Prince Harry. And it's interesting that when they came to Canada, they went out to Vancouver, out to that area. So I'm just like, I wonder if there's a tie to all that. Now, Justin keeps saying that he has this tattoo because of the Haida tradition, right? He admires it and it's to do with his dad. But look, his brother that died in that avalanche had the tattoo on his back. Justin Trudeau now admitted, this is in the Toronto Sun, 6 months before Michael Trudeau's death 20 years ago during an avalanche, he was apparently in a serious car accident on his way to Montreal. As the investigating cops helped the 23-year-old Trudeau gather up his belongings that had been scattered along the roadside, they came across a couple of marijuana joints in a secret can, or a secret can. This would have been in 1998. Simple pot possession back then was just still severely frowned upon by law enforcement, and so young Michael Trudeau, like hundreds of others on any given day in 1998, was busted. So no worries, as they say. My father, Pierre, was very confident that we were able to make those charges go away, our PM told the small town hall organized by Vice Media. We were able to do that because we had the resources. My dad had a couple of connections that we were confident that my little brother was not going to be saddled with a criminal record for life. So, and poof, just like that, the charges disappeared. When I was researching about the tattoo, this article came up, and this just came out a few days ago on February 15th. It says, hit to the head conjures up Mr. Trudeau. So there's this story, this guy said that he, had a dream where he got hit in the head with his freezer or something, or his fridge, and this dream came up, and when he was in his dream, he saw Justin Trudeau. So suddenly I was in Prime Minister Trudeau's presence, in a place where he had been isolating after contracting the virus. He was seated on a desk with no shirt on, and he was looking at a newspaper pictures of himself doing yoga on a counter of a donut shop. Next, he looked at the newspaper from 7 years ago in 2015 and sighed. What's the matter, Mr. Prime Minister? I said. He showed no surprise at me being there. I was just remembering the days when my socks made front-page news around the world, he said. Then, when I was asked why I appointed an equal number of women to my cabinet, I said because in 2015, that was reported around the world, even in the United States. He sighed again, and when I traveled back then, I was besieged by a woman like I was a pop star and spent hours signing autographs, Trudeau said, a smile playing across his face. Those were the days. I tried to cheer him up. But Prime Minister, don't feel too bad, I said. You are still being besieged. I guess it was the wrong thing to say, because he grinned like someone had shoved a hockey stick up his patootie. But it's different now. The besiegers don't want my autograph. They want my hide, he said. Boy, was he down in the dumps. I made another attempt to lighten his mood. Well, you still have that wonderful Haida Raven shoulder tattoo. So this is an article coming from the Whig Standard. Yes, and it is not stenciled on, he said. I wish it was, because the damn Indians still don't like me. Some nonsense about broken promises. Well, they know what they can do with their peace pipes. Time for another cheer-up attempt. You know, Mr. Prime Minister, you should do some charity work. It always feels good to help others, I said. Ha, he replied. Talk to my family about charity work. They got crucified over the We charity. I told him that was because charity work was usually done for free, not for fee. Oh, was that the problem? He said. I see. I began to think this guy had visited one of those shops in Ticonderoga Mohawk territory, and subsequently was what he saw was not what we see, a weird version of seesaw. He immediately perked up. We've got your backs. The government has your back. We are all in this together, he replied. And then, bless him, the Prime Minister closed with a Beatles song. Love, love me do. You know I love you. I'll always love you, so please. That's the end of the article, right? And then there's this thing in paragraphs that says, I was sorry to see Scott LeBlanc has passed away at far too young an age. I worked with Scott and his brother Jack at the Tritonian before Scott joined the police force. Scott's death comes less than 2 years after his father, Roger. It's hard to say goodbye to friends. So I was like, okay, why is this it's like, I think this is like coded, like it's like for people that are in the know. So anyhow, so I was like, okay, so I better go check out who this Scott LeBlanc is. And guess what? He's a homicide detective. Yeah, so he's a detective from the region of the OPP, 30 years service, and he died on January 12th of this year. So we got the 1122022. So we got 5 2s, sorry. And anyhow, I think this has relevance. I don't know, maybe he was checking in on the unsolved mystery of Honey and Barry Shermans. So this is Scott LeBlanc. And they're saying, yeah, it was not related to COVID, why he died. They don't say what he died from. So in the early 1990s, he ran a printing press at the Tritonian newspaper. So that's why that article was talking about this, the Tritonian newspaper. So he was, a journalist. Okay, then he ends up being in the police service, and he's in homicide. Over the years, Mr. LeBlanc worked homicide and major crime bureaus with the OPP and worked out of several detachments across eastern Ontario. So, yeah, and this unsolved mystery of the Shermans, this was a high-profile family, and they were in lots of lawsuits. I looked into all their stats because they were working with opioids, right? So they were calling out companies that were all of a sudden, tripling their sales in opioid. And they were coming up with a degenerate opioid product. So they were in lawsuits with these other companies that didn't want them selling the no-name brand of opioids. And I know this all ties into the United States and, the whole opioid crisis of all these, increased sales of opioids. And this all ties into opium, right? So it all goes back to the sailors and, trying to get the opium, and everything always goes back to the Navy. This whole story is about Admiralty law and Captain Cook. Okay, and I've got to get into this old Blackbeard thing. It just goes on and on. Hang on with me. It gets crazier. This story is absolutely nuts. So this is Honey and Barry Sherman, and they were murdered by their swimming pool, tied to their swimming pool. Their company was Apotex, And eventually this house that they were murdered in was torn down in 2019. There's something really fishy going on, especially with that weird article about the guy dreaming he was talking to Trudeau. It was almost like, he was dropping like something, they know something, right? And it probably has to do with that homicide detective, Mr. LeBlanc. So anyhow, when they first died in 2017 on December 15th, the homicide detective at the scene ruled it was a murder-suicide, and the Sherman's case was presented as such in the Canadian press, with sworn police documents obtained by the Toronto Star describing the investigation in relation only to Honey's homicide and made no mention of Barry being murdered. Those who knew the Shermans were outraged at the accusation, and they believed that both Sherman's deaths were murders. 6 weeks later, Toronto police agreed that the deaths of the Barry and Honey Shermans were a double homicide. It has been over a year since the Shermans' murders, but the identity of the killer or the killers is still unknown. Okay, so this is really interesting. And then we have the head of the Ottawa police just resigned, so who knows what's going down. I guess we'll never know, but it's all very interesting. Now, this is where it gets really, really bizarre. Okay, so it's talking about Justin Trudeau's birth. So he was the second child of Canadian history to be born to the Prime Minister, right? So on April 14th, 1972, Trudeau's father and mother hosted a gala at the National Arts Center in which visiting U.S. President Richard Nixon said, "I'd like to toast the future Prime Minister of Canada to Justin Pierre Trudeau," to which Pierre Trudeau responded that should his son ever assume the role, he hoped he would have the grace and skill of the president. Earlier that same day, U.S. First Lady Pat Nixon had come to see him in the nursery to deliver a gift, a stuffed toy Snoopy. Nixon's White House audio tapes later revealed Nixon referred to the visit as wasting 3 days up there. That trip we needed like a hole in the head. Okay, so I was just like, what the heck is that? That is code language, and Nixon knew he was going to become Prime Minister eventually. So Trudeau's parents announced their separation in May 27, 1977. He was 5 years old. His father was given primary custody. There had been repeated rumors of reconciliation for many years afterwards. However, his mother's attorney, Michael Levine, filed in Toronto Supreme Court, Ontario, for no-fault divorce on November 16, 1983. So that's quite a final. It took a while. So they loved each other incredibly, passionately, completely, but there was 30 years between them, and my mom never was an equal partner in what encompassed my father's life, his duty, his country. Trudeau, his 3 half-siblings, Okay, so I'm just fascinated with this whole thing, with the Snoopy and Nixon knowing that he was going to become Prime Minister. It's almost like they know the future, right? It's really like that. I do believe they do. So in this article, they're saying apparently Nixon is a psychic. I'm like, oh yeah, it's called the Looking Glass. So Pat Nixon brings Justin a Snoopy. I had to think about this for a few days. What did it mean? Was to have a private chat with Margaret Trudeau today after coffee at the Prime Minister's residence, and she planned to bring along a big Snoopy stuffed toy for the Trudeau 4-month-old Justin. The Nixons brought a number of special gifts for their Canadian hosts, including a Tiffany silver bowl on a pedestal, engraved with the presidential seal for the Governor General, And then they presented Mrs. Michener's with the porcelain nuthatcher bird on a branch of a tree decorated with yellow flowers and green ivy. And also an autographed picture of the Nixons in a silver frame. The Nixons gave the Prime Minister a highly accurate clock with special description from the President. The Trudeaus also received a pair of antique hand-colored engravings of the White House and the Capitol as it looked back in the 1839. Yeah, because that's when the infiltration, I guess, happened, um, afterwards with the Titanic and everything, when, the United States really fell to the Federal Reserve, and they lost control. And this has been an ongoing battle between different factions, elite factions in the world market, and who's controlling the banks and all this. And this is all going back to the War of Independence, as the people from Europe trying to get away from the control of the Royal Navy. Basically, they're trying to get away from the English Empire. Now, back in 2018, all of a sudden, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau gets funny socks from Belarus, right? This is close to Russia. So there's this sock company that just happens to give Justin Trudeau Snoopy socks because they know the inside joke. So they give him these socks, and they mention, turns out that when Justin Trudeau was a baby, Richard Nixon and his wife Pat visited his father Pierre Trudeau. Yeah, so they knew. And then they didn't get thank you from giving the socks to him. It took a long-awaited response letter from the administration of the Canadian Prime Minister. Finally came on February 16th. Well, February 16th happened to be the day that Justin Trudeau announced the Emergency Law Act in Canada so that he could take down all these protesters. So that's not a coincidence. And then he says, on behalf, I want to thank you for this touching gift. Yeah, because they're touching on a subject. Trudeau is well known internationally for his fancy socks that he wears. And I know the Pat King, who's one of the organizers for the truck convoy, when he was talking to the Fifth Estate for one of his interviews, they were talking. He ends up mentioning, he called them Trudeau fancy socks. I don't know if it was with the interview, but yeah, he's mentioned it before. He calls them Mr. Fancy Socks. So yeah, Trudeau's known for all these different socks. Here he's wearing Islam socks, but he's doing a high five to somebody wearing a crown with looks like a pentagram star on it. Here he's got rubber ducky. This is at the World Economic Forum. This one he's got Star Wars. These ones are Chewbacca. This one, planet socks. Save the planet, sure. And then he has this one from Ireland. The guy's name is Leo, his first name, so it ties into the Leo, the Lion King. Now, they met at Phoenix Park. Yeah, that's about Ascension, right? So I really believe this is all going back to the Royal Navy's Admiralty law, because this is how they've kind of trapped our birth certificates when we sign it with capital letters, and that they create us as being part of the collateral for the debt, of the national debt. And it all ties into this law. And of course, when you go into the court system, you have to stand behind this little docking deck and put your hand on the Bible. It's all to do with this law. Now, somebody sent me a video on this explaining how these laws work, and I found it really fascinating. Appreciate that. I don't know if I can find that video again, but anyhow, if you just look into it, it's really interesting, the whole thing about the Admiralty law. Now, when I started thinking about this, we've got, this looks like Gilligan's Island here, this is all to do about a ship, right? Being stranded on an island. This is the same thing as Peter Pan and Captain Hook and all of this. It's always to do about the sea, because I think we're on a ship. And this is what this Admiralty law is really saying, that we are on a ship. We're being run like we're a part of, like, sea mates on a ship. And, if you try to leave the matrix, it means you're jumping overboard and you're getting off the ship. And I think this is what this is all about. Like, you have to just, like, reject the system for the system to collapse so we can rebuild a new system. So Premier Doug Ford is skipper, and, Trudeau's Gilligan, right? And so it's just hilarious. But I've been saying to myself for months now that when people wear their masks on their chin, I think of it like Blackbeard and Bluebeard, right? So I'm like, because I remember as a kid going to watch, this movie, Walt Disney movie at our little elementary school. It was such a big deal. We're going to go see the, Blackbeard movie. So anyhow, so I'm like, every time I see people do this, this is what I think about. And I think of it like it's all to do with the pirates and everything. So then we have Castro. This is a photo, and that's supposed to be Trudeau touching him. Like, I don't know if this is really Trudeau, but the whole point is, it's the whole Blackbeard, right? It all ties into Fidel Castro. Now, I've been following the real Pat King because he's one of the organizers with the convoy, right? And he's always putting, like, lives on. And he did do an interview with the Fifth Estate. They tried to pin him to the wall with something he'd said when he was trying to get on an airplane, and they delayed him and he couldn't get on the airplane or something. And he said, if you guys keep pushing people to the point that you're doing, eventually, Trudeau is going to push people that they're going to get to the point where they're just going to want to put a bullet in his head. Okay, so he ended up saying this back in November. So they wanted to drag that all out and said, look, you're promoting violence, people looking up to you, what are you doing? Why don't you just leave? Blah, blah, blah. And he's like, I'm not leaving. I've been here before, because he was fighting for the pipeline. And he'd done this before. So I think he was recruited. But the interesting thing is, he has a peg leg. Okay, and he mentioned Admiralty law at one point in this interview. Okay, and so, and he, and then they've got the bullet in the head thing, and I'm just like, this is what Nixon had said, right? It was all about going up to Canada. He'd rather have a hole in his head. So I'm just like, what is going on? So I started going like, okay, is he like the pirate that wants to rob from the rich and give to the poor? Because that's what the pirates used to do, right? And so I started thinking about the Blackbeard thing, and this all ties into Walt Disney, right? So prior to becoming a pirateur, Barbossa had lost his right shin and foot during Blackbeard's attack on the Black Pearl. Now, it's all about the pearl. Pearl is the ascension, and the Black Pearl ties to Caesar, because he gave his mistress, I think her last name was Savelle Pearl, right? And he went to England to get this pearl to give to his mistress. Okay, so the Black Pearl all ties into Rome and Caesar. So after losing his leg, Barbossa sported a peg leg in the place of his right shin and foot. Yeah. Okay, so this is all tying into it. So this is all going into Captain Jack Sparrow and the curse of the Black Pearl. I don't know the whole story. I don't think I remember this movie, but it's all tying into, the whole pirate thing. So anyhow, so then we go back into the House of Commons, and one of the premiers is bringing up, the whole thing that Pat King, is almost like a terrorist because he, is threatening to kill the Prime Minister. So they're blowing it totally out of the water and bringing this all up in the House of Commons. Now, there was something going on with Pat King's Steak, Pat King's of the Steaks. It's a restaurant in Philadelphia, because this all ties back to Philadelphia. Now, in this restaurant, Pat Pat's King of Steaks restaurant in Philadelphia, there was a shooting, and 2 people were murdered, and they happened to have a Corona shirt on. Now, somebody sent me this. The Pat King's sidekick, George, is always shouting freedom. He was dressed up as a kind of shaman, the same as, the whole Capitol, thing that happened when they stormed the Capitol. Okay, we had the Odin showed up on Odin's Wild Hunt Day, which was January 6th. And this guy's almost dressed up the same. He has war paint on. He's got the red and the blue, so he's got the duality, and he's holding the stick. It's like, Odin's stick. So this was the first day that they arrived in Ottawa. Okay, so then I started thinking about what the heck is this Snoopy all about, right? So it's like it has to be something. They keep mentioning it. He gets socks given to him. Nixon said it. His wife gave him the Snoopy. So I was thinking, oh my God, it's Snoopy and the Red Baron, right? And I always thought Snoopy was the Red Baron, but no, Snoopy is trying to fight the Red Baron. The Red Baron was a German Air Force pilot, okay, in World War I. And he, was known as the Red Baron because he was shooting down so many of the opposition, right? And he had racked up so many deaths that he actually had trophies made for every single one, made it in a silver cup, so, it was, and then they couldn't get silver anymore. And anyhow, it's like this, you can go into his whole story. It's just crazy. But this is all tying into Snoopy and the Peanuts. Now, the reason is because his name is Rich Hoffman, was mentioned regularly in the comic strip Peanuts by Charles Schulz. Now, he imagined his dog house to be the Sopwith Camel, which was a type of aircraft, and carried a personal grudge against the Red Baron, whom he imagined to be the arch enemy. In spite of Snoopy's best efforts, however, the Baron always shot him down with little difficulty, leading Snoopy to curse the Baron for his success and swear to one day shoot him down. Okay, so Snoopy wants to shoot the Red Baron. Okay? The Red Baron was inspiration for Avalon Hill's 1970 board game, Richthofen War, one of the first World War I aerial combat board games. The Red Baron was also prominently featured in Snoopy and the Red Baron in the Milton Bradley skill game, released in 1970. So they really tried to push this theme, right? That Snoopy and the Red Baron. And we did have Snoop Dogg playing at the Super Bowl. Now, what's weird is the Sopwith Camel was originally the Sopwith Pup. So I guess that's how it all ties into Snoopy, the dog, being a pup. So it has to do with the plane. There's no true confirmation of who actually shot down the Red Baron eventually, but it was awarded to Arthur Roy Brown. So we have like King Arthur and we have Brown. Now, Brown ties into the whole Civil War in the United States because it was John Brown that was fighting for the slaves, and he was hung in Virginia for trying to free the slaves. So he was the one that got the whole Civil War started. But this guy, okay, lives in Ottawa, okay, or lived in Ottawa. He died in 1944 on March 9th. Carleton Place is just a suburb, well, just outside of Ottawa, and place of death, Stouffville. These are all really close to Ottawa, okay? So this whole thing with Snoopy, all ties to Ottawa. Snoopy and the Red Baron was recorded as a song from the Royal Guardsmen. So that's kind of weird. That's the name of the band. So the Red Baron always painted his aircrafts red. So after the turn of the century in the clear blue skies over Germany. 80 men died trying to end the spree of the bloody Red Baron of Germany. These are parts of the lyrics. They have Snoopy in there as the Ace of Diamonds. The Ace of Diamonds announces a letter or a message that you will receive soon. In a broader sense, it means that you will get a new insight into your life and your problems. The Ace of Diamonds could come as advice of a friend or a book or a vivid dream at night. It will give you a new perspective. The Ace of Pentacles is like the Ace of Diamonds, so it brings prosperity, divine gifts, or lost opportunities. It has to do with coins and money too, so there's something to do with money. The zodiac that rules it is Capricorn, which is Saturn, the god of the golden age or the keeper of time, and Taurus, which is where the Ein Sof is. It's the labyrinth, it's the silver gate. Ruled by Venus, the pentacle, and Virgo, which is the woman in the sky, the bride, right? Ruled by Mercury and Earth. But they're all ruled by Earth. So it's very tied into Earth. Or like the Garden of Eden, they're saying here. So the card is a symbol of the Garden of Eden. It is about the beginning of paradise, the first memories of our connection to the planet, and the victory of health. The two mountains on the card exist outside of the garden and symbolizes the hardships of duality. Oh yeah, that's what we're dealing with right now. When you see police pushed up against protesters and they're trying to switch each other, that's about as duality as you get. So they're saying here, when you are disconnected from the Garden of Eden, your conscious and your subconscious come out of balance. We have to consciously move towards the garden, the inner voice, in order to have a good relationship with the self. Tarot's main objective is to teach on the conscious and subconscious levels in order to bridge them together. Now, I found one of the Ace of Diamonds that has the horns, like the truck horns, and then there's the Death card, which is really, you know, the death symbol. It's really to do with ascension, okay, because you have to have death for rebirth. So these are the horses that they used to trample some of the protesters. They did knock people on the ground, and it's despicable. It's like, you know, I think this is part of the whole awakening, awakening the world to see what tyranny government can do, right? It's really bad. So, yeah. So here he is with his crown on, and I think his crown is going to fall because I think he is the Lion King, right? He's representing the collapse of the fixed cross. The fixed cross has Leo, Scorpio, Aquarius, and Taurus. Okay, and now here he is showing that he is the Lion King. So this was a festival that they had, I think, in Vancouver, and he came to do the painting of the eye. So it's like, you know, God's eye, in a sense, on the Leo, the Lion King. Now, this was on a Lunar New Year, so this was in 2017. So that was the year of the rooster. So Prime Minister Justin Trudeau will be visiting Vancouver today for the second time since the approving of the Kinder Morgan Canada Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion, which the native people were not happy about. You can see the lion with having the eye there. So here they're talking about this dance, this Chinese lion dance has a tradition in China, more than 1,000 years old. There are numerous versions of its origin, but one of the most obvious and popular reasons is that at that time the Chinese people needed something for protection as well as to give them good luck, health, blessing, and prosperity. These objectives and concepts gave birth to Feng Shui and the Chinese dragon and lion subsequently. To empower the lion to do its duty, it is brought to life by the eye dotting ceremony. Yeah, so it's called the eye dotting. After the eye dotting, the lion will pay homage to its deities by giving 3 bows, first to the green dragon's side, the left, and then the right, and then finally the center before doing the traditional lion dance performance. The first part to be dotted will be the mirror on the front of the lion's head. This is known as the third eye, then followed by the nose so that it can breathe, and then inside the mouth, the ears and the eyes, the head, the neck, body, tail, and finally the limbs. After that, the lion will move slowly and the music grows louder and louder. So yeah, so the mirror is your like third eye. So when you see a mirror, it's the mirror of you, but it's the reflection of seeing intuitively and seeing through the illusion, right? It's like your third eye gives you this insight. So yeah, so anyhow, he was all part of that, and has to do with this whole ceremony of basically ascension. So yeah, I really do think he represents the AI path. This picture kind of proves it. And I do think he is playing a role. Here he's playing a role about Vimy Ridge back in April 8th and 9th in 2007. The Great War was a CBC television film documentary. So yeah, so he's acting. You know, he's always been acting. Here he is goofing off and acting again here. You know, he's called the preposterous politician. What was so ridiculous when he said, I love you more, or, you know, he said, somebody said mankind, he goes, oh, we don't use that word here. We use people kind, you know, so it's like we're not allowed to use gender anymore. So this is all tying into the transhumanism agenda. You know, it's all to do with AI. There is no sex because people won't be giving birth anymore. It's going to be, you know, basically just walking zombie slaves at some point of this storyline. If you don't want to wake up right now and see that this evil is growing, if you don't want to see it, you're going to be put onto this, you know, AI mutable cross where there's no heart and there's no key to get out. You're going to be locked in that. And that's your choice because you've had the free will to see. And here's a good cartoon kind of explaining it. You'll become Frankenstein. Justin Trudeau, that's what he wants you to be. Cyberbullying has learned behavior, but learned where? He went on national TV and called people that don't want to be vaccinated misogynist, racist idiots. You know, it's like political suicide, right? So it's like it has to be done as just like to show how much are people going to not tolerate people that are different than them? You know, is it to that extent where you just, you know, are going to like throw them under the truck? But what's fascinating is that some people do believe he's like Superman, right? And that they'll just follow him no matter what he does. Because I think it's like it's your ego. Like if you voted for him and you just don't want to look like, you know, you did the wrong thing and support conspiracy theorists or non-jabbers, you know, it's just your pride is going to keep you locked into that negative timeline. So you have to like let go of everything you knew before, and you have to just like be willing to release this whole matrix and realize that it's collapsing and you just have to jump ship. This is kind of really what you got to do at this point. You try to save as many people as you're jumping off, you know, like help them out if they want to be saved. If they don't want to be saved, they're going down with the ship, man. It's the Titanic. And if you think this is all about fighting the other side, the duality, and you want to be physical with it, no. These protesters are not being physical. They're just saying we want unity. We don't want to fight anymore. We want unity. But Trudeau is bringing in, you know, the top guns and chasing people, you know, down by horses trampling them. That has nothing to do with representing unity. You know, he wants the division to stay, and he wants to provoke people to be violent, you know, because that's when they can deal with you, when you're violent. But when you want unity, they can't deal with you. Okay, so he ends up gathering 1,800 police officers. Was it yesterday? Or yeah, yesterday before, day before, Pat King, they staked them out, and they found out that they were all in this infinity building. I couldn't believe it. I was like, infinity building? And guess what is inside? It has the DNA up in the ceiling. That's the infinity. It's almost like the double eight, right? The double eight is like infinity. It's like the two Mobius strips. Everything's about our DNA. It's our DNA that gets us free from the matrix. Okay, so once you know you can manifest the world that you want, and once you know how special humans are in being able to create the reality, they just want us to create hate, division, and fear, and create that world. But we're choosing not to. We're saying, no, we want to create a different world. And yeah, I think Trudeau's in a hole, literally. You know, he threw the veterans under the bus too. They're supporting the protesters, and he doesn't care. He doesn't care about Native people. He doesn't care about veterans. He doesn't care. All he wants right now is to create division. But that's his role in this game, so that it will help awaken the world. He is the dark raven that is going to show the light, okay? Because the light has to be shown. You have to, you know, take it and put it inside you and shine it back. So it's really fascinating to watch this all unfold. But I think the next thing is going to be a trucker strike, like the Illuminati card. Then, you know, maybe the Pat King did say the U.S. truckers are going to get involved now. So they're going to start doing the blockades and probably striking. And then we're going to have food shortages and high gas prices. So just buckle up. The ride's going to get crazy. But this was a bit of a long one, but I couldn't believe all this information I found out. So I hope you enjoyed it, and just stay watching the show. Stay in bliss. If you have a challenge staying in bliss, I have the Ascension Guide, which has lots of different practices that you can do to help you get to theta brainwave balance so that you can stay in bliss, so your DNA can activate when this big solar flare comes. And also, I have the offering to do consultations. If you just want to talk, I can do just the natal chart, which gives you your life lesson with a written reading. Or we can do the three charts with the Saturn returns, which kind of maps out your whole life and shows you, you know, what your roles are in each part of your life. So anyhow, the whole thing is, you know, I'm here to help if you need the help, and I'm grateful for you to support my channel, and I'm grateful for everybody helping, sending me stuff, and staying in touch with me. I appreciate it. So take care, everyone. Bye. So I think this is probably the realistic tsunami. It's a solar tsunami, and it's coming, guys.